Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Directors of Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District for Thursday, September 10th, 2015. I've asked my colleague, Director Wood, to lead us in a pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director. Ladies and gentlemen, this open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro 14 to be replayed on Saturday, September 12, 2015 at 1 p.m. and Sunday, September 13, 2015 at 1 p.m. on Channel 14. Also webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. This open session meeting is also available for viewing on the district's website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. At this time, we'll take any public comment for items on or not on the agenda. And Madam Clerk, it looks like we're getting the affirmative. So who do we have?
Roger Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, good evening. How are you this evening?
Fine, Director. Chairperson Gould, directors, Chief Wells, staff, Metro Fire. My name is Roger Mitchell, a lifelong resident of this district. And as I stood before you last meeting, advertising our fundraiser dinner for the restoration of number 2, I just wanted to remind you of that again this evening, October the 3rd, 6 p.m. At the Rio Linda Alberta Recreation and Park District. They are the proud owners of number 2, so we would like to see all of you there. I was asked the question about our speakers. We're going to have 4 speakers that evening, and I was asked who they might be, and I couldn't tell you that at that time. We had to check with the Secret Service, we had to check with the Highway Patrol, we had to check with the Sheriff's Office, because the world-class speakers have to have this type of security. So I can tell you this evening that the first speaker of the 4 will be world-class Mr. Mark Wells, the chief of this fire district. I think he's going to talk a little bit about the old firehouse and what's going to happen there. Secondly, there'll be one of your newest employees, Mr. Scott Andrews, who's been a friend of mine for many years, been part of our team. And Chief, if you'll help me, his expertise is in the field of...
Yeah, he's the communication manager.
Right. He has a lot of ideas for the engine room, and we've already worked on a lot of those, so you're going to see a lot of high-tech communications in that engine room. And then you'll have 2 speakers from the National Club, the Horseless Carriage Club of America, to talk about the restoration of the vehicle. So it won't take 20 minutes apiece for those speakers, but I think it'll be very entertaining to see the different things that are going to happen that evening. So with that, I think I couldn't remember if it was Director Gould or the Chief, but I know there's some directors that can't be there this evening, and I can't remember if it was Director Gould or the Chief that said there was a nominal fee for not attending to help the cause. I can't remember what that was.
That was Director Orzali.
Yes,
okay.
I recall it as Director Arzali.
Thanks
yes.
for throwing me under the bus. But yeah, that was Director Orzali, who will be paying for all of us to attend, apparently. Something like that. I think that's what I remember. And also, Mr. Mitchell, it's my understanding that your organization had some desire to provide a evening, as it were, for the directors out at Old Station 111, where the directors could be there and have your organization and group participate in a dinner with us.
That's correct. We thought a dinner amongst the restoration we would like to provide for you. It gives you more an opportunity to see what's going on with that restoration as well as the restoration inside that engine room. So you're exactly correct, Director.
Okay, and so to my colleagues, what I'd like to announce this evening is it is historic with our body that we have one meeting during the month of December. What I am proposing, gentlemen, is that the first and only meeting in December that we actually run our board meeting at Old Station 111. And after the board meeting, then participate with all of Roger's crew and folks. And so it is my desire that we take our board meeting on the road, that meeting in December, for the evening out there to take advantage of the fine work that the men and women are doing out there at Old Station 111 and with that fire truck, as well as have a board meeting in the community, which we have done in the past. It's been several years since we've done that, but I am one that particularly enjoyed being in the firehouse, being available out in the community where people could come from the community. We will also at that time have a new appointed director. And so it would be a good idea for us to go out into that, part of our district and be able to participate with some of that person's constituency as well. So I'm proposing that the staff begin to prepare for that event out at Old Station 111, and we will have a relatively short meeting like we've had historically with not many action items and not a lot of content as we, one, celebrate the season, as it were, and also be able to take advantage of this this offer from the group that Roger's representing. So do I hear any objections? Doesn't much matter. I've said it. It's happening. There we go. Okay. Roger,
Last
anything else?
comment, board members and any staff that Chief Wells brings to that meeting, please be advised, all your wives are welcome. I think the original intent was to host the board and wives, so please, we'd be more than happy to host all the wives from the directors as well as the staff.
Okay, spouses or significant others.
Spouses and/or others.
Okay,
Yes,
very good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right, any other public comments, Madam Clerk?
No, that was the only speaker this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's move on now to consent. I'll entertain a motion to approve consent.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the consent.
I have a first. I have a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Rosali?
Aye.
Wood? Aye. Kelly? Aye. Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to presentation items. We'll start this evening with fire station reopening with Deputy Chief Taylor and Captain Wagaman.
Well, good evening, directors, Chief Wells, staff. It's been a long time, but I will have to say that I'm standing up here tonight as the Deputy Chief of Operations of this amazing fire department to actually say, after a very long downturn of the economy and the reduction of services to our communities and the citizens, that I'm actually getting to stand in front of you that I'm going to say I'm going to recommend opening up of an engine company in our Battalion 14, which is in our Division 4, of opening up Engine 68 at Fire Station 68 in the Anatolia area. I feel very proud that finally, after all this time, that we actually get to start adding resources back to our community. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Captain Wagaman. He's just going to give you a very quick brief on the statistics that go behind on why I'm recommending 68.
Excellent. Captain Wagaman.
Thank you, Chief Taylor. Good evening, directors and Chief Wells. The map provided in front of you depicts the average response times for all Metro Fire run zones in 2014. The color of each of these run zones signifies the averages based on seconds within that given area. You will notice the run zones within Station 66 or 68's first due area are red in color. This indicates an average response time between 7 minutes and 55 seconds and 12 minutes and 49 seconds. I converted the seconds to minutes because I knew I would be asked to do that, and I probably couldn't do it on the spot. Currently, within Stations 68's 15 run zones, the average response time is 9 minutes and 25 seconds. When comparing the pre-closure response times to the current response times, once Engine 68 is reopened, the average response time will be reduced by 2 minutes and 22 seconds. In a service where every second counts, we felt that this response time reduction was significant. Lastly, since 2011, there's been a 27% increase in calls within Station 68's first response area, further reinforcing our support in reopening Station 68. Thank you.
Captain, thank you very much. Members of the board, questions for Captain Wagaman or DC Taylor? Captain Wagaman, if you could stay there for just a second, maybe you can help clarify for me. The legend on the left side shows that we have in light red 475 seconds to 769 seconds. And then we have a darker red representing 770 and 1630.
That's correct.
It's interesting to me as you look at this, and some people in the public may look at this and wonder why. You'll notice that near Station 59 or 63, there are deeper reds closer to the firehouse. Perhaps we want to explain to the community why closer to the firehouse is a darker red than farther away from the firehouse. So the people that are having that question don't necessarily have to send an email in, and we have multiple conversations about that.
Absolutely. In these specific areas that you've identified, these are rural. And the access points to a lot of these addresses take a significant amount of time to gain access to. Yes, they are in close proximity to the fire station, but it takes us a lot longer to get there because of dirt roads and other items that we'd have to work around in order to, arrive on scene. So, and again, these specific run zones are identifying just the averages within that area. There could be some response times that were significantly better and ones that weren't as good. And it could only have one call within that specific zone for that given year.
Well, that's an excellent explanation, so that the public sees that while it's closer, it may be an issue of access given where those calls are, and as you've explained, it may only be 1 or 2 calls during that timeline, therefore it drives the averages way up. So that's a great explanation, thank you, because I'm sure someone looking at this saying, how do you get a darker red closer to the firehouse? But again, you've done a marvelous job of explaining that. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add to
Go
that
ahead.
also, that being in my district, at the access points, there's a lot of livestock that is out there in some of these rural areas, so when they have to find an access point, preferably a gate, they don't take the fence line down for the prevention of property and
Good point.
livestock as well.
Good point. Okay, excellent. I'm sure that my colleagues are excited to pass this budget and be able to implement this proposal this evening, and it's a good thing. You're right, Chief. We're on the right path to being able to do this for the citizens of this district.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Chief Wells, any comments? I saw you raised your hand, or?
No, but you know me, I'll always add
All right.
something.
You bet.
No, this is one of those, data-driven decisions, and we're excited about this. I don't want to underrepresent, and I know Chief Taylor's not doing that either. We're very excited about this. This is a big event for our community.
yeah, absolutely.
And obviously, we don't want to get the cart before the horse. We're going to vote on a budget tonight and make sure that everything goes as it needs to go. But once this happens, we will be messaging out. There will be some public outreach to make sure that that community is aware that we are doing this, and we're looking forward to it. It's really it's been a downturn where in a lot of budgets we've been closing, and we have other closed engine. We have an engine 106 currently,
Right.
and those were, when we were talking about different engines to open, we were considering all those options. But there's a fire truck in that fire station, and so the 3 to 6 minutes or the 7 to 9 to 12 minute response times really matter in these areas. Not as frequent, but it's like not as often. But when it happens, it's catastrophic if you don't get there.
Yeah, I think this is phenomenal. Good work. Appreciate your presentation item. Anything else relative to this item? We'll now move on to action, or presentation item number 2, computer-aided dispatch. Deputy Chief Holbrook.
Good evening, President Gould, directors. My name is Christopher Holbrook. I am the Deputy Chief of Administration for the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. I also sit as the chairperson on the Communications Center JPA, and as such, I'm bringing tonight a little bit of visibility for you to a new contract that is going to be signed in about 2 weeks for a computer-aided dispatch. A computer-aided dispatch for the layperson may think of a big magic black box, and in fact what it is just a software agreement. That's how far we've come in the process of what computer-aided dispatch is. To give you an idea of why now, the legacy system that we run is a Cobalt system. It's an old system. We've actually had about 6 failures in the last 2 years. And you can imagine, given what we do for a living, a failure of a computer-aided dispatch is a bad day for all of us. Now, I will say that the communications staff here, not only primarily Tyler Wagaman, who's done it for the longest time, when that happens, it's an instantaneous response. However, we've gotten to a point, and if you think about your home computer, it gets to a point of being slow because data now, we're pumping much more data through it. We can literally break our system on a daily basis if we pump too much data through it, and so it's time to replace it. That's a rough explanation as to why. So what I have is a contract, and that contract for software primarily has been reviewed already. It's been reviewed by legal, it's been reviewed by finance, and it's been reviewed by our technical folks who actually put it together. I want to make it clear, we did not get this done through staff work. We actually got it done through staff support work. Tyler Wagaman, Matt Roseberry, and Amanda Thomas are all directly responsible for us actually having this to hold before you tonight. So the only thing that I want to give you an idea on is, number one, when we started this conversation 5-6 years ago about replacing the CAD, it was a $6-7 million contract. Kind of a nut to crack, which was almost insurmountable given the economic downturn. Due to improvements in technology and an extremely progressive and aggressive bargaining team, that number is now down to $2.6 million. Wow. Now, you only own a portion of that because everything in the communication center is prorated by call volume, so that's another piece of good news. But what that has gotten you is not only a new CAD system, if you will, all of the mobile applications that go along with that, that's iPads, that's computers within the fire stations, all of those now have an interrelated connection that we can utilize the data through. All of those then also require what's called a bridge or a linkage between the systems. Much like your iPhone, there's not a app that you run on your iPhone. There's multiple apps. Same thing happens on this. So there is vehicle locating, there is mapping, all of those are different apps and have to be synced up. That's actually all of that syncing is included in this. They were literally able to negotiate 114 days of training into the contract. That not only covers communication center, that's also district staff and everybody else so that this becomes a seamless system. There are third-party products. There's a $2 million performance bond. There is a litany of issues, including 5 years of prepaid maintenance that were negotiated for what was going to be 7 into 2.6. So when I say that I take my hat off to these folks, the yeoman's work that they did was amazing to get this much stuff into this good of a contract for the district. So with that, it is only a presentation item. I want you to have visibility on it. The 29th of this month is our next meeting, and we will vote on this particular contract. And so, as I say, staff has already reviewed it up and down across the board, and it looks like you're going to get one heck of a deal for one heck of a product. We anticipate that it will be about an 18 to 24-month build, which there are numerous payments that are made along that way, so you're not on the hook for all of this in this particular budget, only a small portion of it. So with that, I will answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Chief Holbrook. Members of the board, questions for Chief Holbrook relative to the CAD? Chief, I have one. I've been approached by a couple of folks about the integration of our CAD with other public safety agencies. Is there a vision moving forward that when you purchase this tool and it gets up to speed, that there'll be some young high schooler that will build an app that will allow for the systems within the sheriff's office and other public safety agencies that have CADs that aren't the same as ours, that there will be some availability to bridge those CAD systems? Because I know it's premature, it may happen before I die, but it may be a good thing that in this region, someday, we have the same CAD, so that all public safety agencies, it doesn't matter what public agency you're talking about, everybody's playing on the same, to use your example, iPad. So it looks like Captain Wagaman has stepped back up to the plate to give me the what's it about.
Yes, Director, and that is a great question. This
That's why I
CAD
asked it.
system is a .NET platform, and with that, there's endless possibilities. Not only can we integrate and link with other CAD systems, those that have the same software, we will be able to talk to immediately. For instance, the city of Roseville, with the same CAD system, we will be able to talk to on day one and start sharing resources. So that's very significant for us, and we're excited about doing that. And as far as the applications go, again, .NET platform, you build the application, we can make it work. Endless possibilities.
Well, I like that answer. Anybody else? You'd think somebody from the sheriff's office would have asked that question, but apparently I gotta be the guy. Jeez. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Outstanding. We're moving in the right direction. And thank you. We can't obviously let it go without thanking the same folks that Chief Holbrook has thanked. Obviously, taking something that was projected to be a $7 million event for us, or some portion of that, was a little bit troubling for some of us as we kind of look to the future. And so thank you for all of your hard work to get that down to something that allows us to shift those resources to other places like, 106, things like that. So good things. Excellent job. Congratulations. With that, we'll move on to action items this evening. We'll first start off with a presentation on the final budget for fiscal years 15 and 16 and 16-17 from our CFO. And then after that, we are going to have some comments by our chief and some public comment relative to this upcoming budget that we are going to propose. And so I see fingers being pointed, which that must mean that either Chief Wells, you're going to start, and then our CFO will go, so however you want to do it. But
Yeah.
I see
Well,
you're at the mic, so you go.
Well, I'm literally just going to start this off as we've done in the past. Tonight, we're putting before the board the final budget, and we've talked about the budget. We started the preliminary budget process. Last needed to be done by June 30th, and now we've worked through that, and we are here tonight with a final budget. It is a two-year budget developed to show the two-year impact of currently projected revenues and expenditures. We're recommending tonight for adoption will actually be the first year, the 15-16 budget. And then the 16-17 budget is presented tonight for information purposes that shows the impacts that occur when we defer capital spending and those types of things. So we have a snapshot into next year to see how this year's decisions impact that and revenues, et cetera. Also, the final budget reflects the changes that we have made since the preliminary budget based on currently available information. As you know, that's based on preliminary assessments, and now we have more information moving forward, which will also include what the actual 2014-15 actual revenues and expenditures and final property tax rolls actually were that we collected from the county versus just projections. As a result of an improved revenue picture for the 15-16 year, combined with an approximate $7 million surplus that we had from fiscal year 14-15, this final budget includes several items, including we're going to continue to fund a truck company that was previously grant funded through the SAFER company, or SAFER grant, excuse me. And that was actually in the preliminary budget scheduled to be closed in October, if you'll remember. So we're going to keep that open. And we're also maintaining the reopening of a closed engine company, which we talked about tonight. We're recommending Engine 68. And that was actually an engine company was supposed to be opening in October as planned, so we're maintaining that. But we were previously going to be closing that SAFER truck company. So we're keeping both those resources open. The final budget also continues to reflect the plan for the 2 fire academies that we have this year. We have 1 academy going currently with 45 recruits as we speak. And then we will be having the second half of that of 55 in the spring. But that'll also be expected to cover the backfilling for vacant firefighter positions, as well as covering expected retirements, reducing constant staffing overtime by approximately $7 million this year. We're also happy to discuss that we've had some very good meet and confer discussions with Local 522 relative to the position authorization document. As you know, that's the number of funded positions in the budget. This budget is including 6 personnel impacts. 3 of those are existing positions. One is a safety captain position that is an enhancement from a safety specialist position. And then we have 2, an HR and a payroll specialist positions that are enhanced to analysts. And really those jobs they're doing the work now at a much higher level than what they're classified at. And then we're happy to, with 100 brand new employees and the new personnel that we've hired in the last 3 or 4 years, we're having 1 more fire captain in both EMS training and for the training division proper. So we'll have one more EMS captain, one more training captain, and then we're happy to announce that we're proposing a deputy fire marshal position that is going to really bring a piece of leadership into that organization that is specific to the community risk reduction specialty. I mean, I think we all understand how complex that operation is. And so we felt that it was necessary to have a supervisorial position in there underneath the fire marshal. As you know, the fire marshal position typically is a chief officer that moves into that position for a short period of time and part of a succession planning. And we felt it was very important that we would have a solid presence of leadership and understanding of how the division is going. And really happy with what's happening in the fire community risk reduction division. Very, very positive things Chief Lozano and Chief Daniels have done over there. So those are the three, or the positions that we're changing in the PAD. And I can't emphasize enough that we're doing this collectively with 522 in a responsive manner. These are budgeted in a 12-month period from July. If you'll, count in the calendar, we're in the middle of September right now. So those will be implemented as we can in a realistic time frame so that we get the needs in this year's budget. But we're being very sympathetic and or respectful of the positions as they relate to 522 and the PAD and meet and confer process. So also we'd like to, unfortunately in this budget, as you look at it on paper, this budget also reflects a $1 million deficit. But we'll talk about that as we go through this as that relates to the surplus, opening fire stations, increasing resources and efficiencies. And combined with the surplus from 14-15, reserves are expected to be at 11.4% of operating expenditures at the end of this fiscal year, 15-16, as compared to 8.8, which was projected at the preliminary budget. So we're looking solid in the reserve category, not at the 15% that the board policy would be like to be at, but as we've discussed, we'd like to have service and commitment to the community before we're stacking into the bank. So that's the balance that we're projecting. So looking ahead into 2016-17 budget, without an improved revenue outlook, additional expense reductions would need to be explored for a balanced budget in that second year. But CFO Thomas will be talking about a lot of those as we move forward, those assumptions. Also, as in past practice, management will continue to work with the board and labor to address the ongoing fiscal challenges and work towards restoring all the services to the greatest extent possible while ensuring that the operational needs are met with adequate reserves. And one other thing, and Amanda will talk to this as well, but one thing we'd like to point out, we are in a negotiation process currently with our labor groups, and that those assumptions, there's no assumptions in this budget reflecting those discussions at this time. So just in all transparency. So we'll move over to Amanda for the rest of the presentation.
Great, thank you. Good evening, directors, Chief Wells. I'm Amanda Thomas, the Chief Financial Officer for the district. Before I get started this evening, I did want to take the opportunity, first of all, to thank the staff in the Finance Division, many of whom are here this evening for all their work in helping to put this budget together, as well as the staff and the managers in other divisions who really put a lot of time and effort into understanding fiscal year 14-15 and our expenditures versus our budget that year, and helped to inform this final budget for 15-16 as a result of that. So I thought I'd start off this evening with just a little bit of background on where we are. As Chief Wells mentioned, preliminary budget was adopted June 11th, 2015, and at that time we had approximately $400,000 deficit in the general fund. Since that time, more information has become available that has informed the changes that we're proposing to the final budget this evening. Most significantly, we now have a very good idea of what our actual revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 14-15 were, and we've used that information to help inform our budget for 15-16. We also have the actual property tax rolls from the county. So our property tax consultant, HDL, has been able to take that information and come up with a revised, refined estimate of property tax revenues for 15-16. So when we look at the final budget general fund revenues, we're now showing general fund revenues about $200,000 higher than what we were showing at preliminary budget. And that's the result of about a $900,000 increase in the projected revenues for medic cost recovery, really resulting from what we saw in 14-15 for actual revenues in that category, and assuming that we would maintain revenues of that same amount going into 15-16. That increase, however, is offset somewhat by decreases primarily in property tax revenues. So that new refined estimate is about $500,000 lower than what we had originally been projecting for preliminary budget. And then looking at the expenditure side of things, we're budgeting for expenditures of about $900,000 higher than what we were showing at preliminary budget. That's entirely the result of an additional $1 million budgeted for labor, and I'll go into some more of that detail as we move through the presentation. That's offset somewhat by reductions in other areas. Let's see. So this table shows the final budget for the general fund compared to the preliminary unaudited actual results for fiscal year 2014-15. Looking at the top line there, and the final budget is going to be the middle column. So looking at the top line, you can see that we're budgeting for revenues in the general fund of $187 million, expenses of roughly $185 million, with transfers coming out of the general fund of about $3 million, all of that netting to the $1 million budgeted deficit. You can see that $1 million budgeted deficit compares to a roughly $7 million surplus last year in fiscal year 2014-15. So I thought it would actually be helpful to walk through how we went from a $7 million surplus in 14-15 to a $1 million deficit in 15-16. And so we'll start off with the $7 million in 14-15. Each of those boxes represents $1 million. And then the first thing that I want to talk about is we have $2 million in additional costs just as the result of retirement rates going up, medical rates going up, workers' comp, and OPEB. So right off the bat, that's $2 million in added costs in 15-16 that we did not have in 14-15. So that brings that $7 million down to $5 million. And then there's a $2 million net impact from the expiration of that SAFER grant. So that provided $2.4 million in funding in 2014-15. We've mitigated that impact somewhat because we did convert a truck to an engine on July 1st. So that was a $400,000 savings, but the net impact was $2 million in additional costs that needed to be covered in the general fund. So that brings it down to $3 million. And then we have $3 million in costs associated with reopening the engine that we've talked about tonight, conducting the academies, so that's paying for both the recruits and the instructors, filling vacancies, and then what I'm calling net position adjustments. So some new positions, some conversions, and then some eliminated and defunded positions. But the net of all of those things listed there is $3 million in cost. So then we're down to zero. So essentially that $7 million surplus is offset by $7 million of additional labor costs budgeted in fiscal 15-16. And then moving from there, we have $2 million in additional services and supplies expenses. So you can see that one of those boxes is kind of hashed and the other one's solid. That hash box really represents the portion of the expenses that are expenses that are rebudgeted. So amounts that we have budgeted to spend in 14-15 but did not and are now being rolled over to 15-16. So kind of tracking those things separately, and then the red box being expenses above and beyond those. Additionally, $2 million in capital. Again, roughly half of that, or a significant portion, being items that were rebudgeted from 14-15 into 15-16. And then you can see we're down to negative $4 million in our accounting here. Finally, we have $3 million in additional net revenue in 15-16 that's offsetting those those additional expenses that gets us to the net result of a $1 million deficit in fiscal 15-16. And you can see that I'm still showing that as a hash box, and you can really think of that as, that $1 million as money that was budgeted to be spent in 14-15, but was not. So in other words, if we had spent it, we would have had a $6 million surplus as opposed to a $7 million surplus, and then we would be showing a balanced budget as opposed to a $1 million deficit in 15-16. This chart shows the breakdown of revenue that's budgeted for fiscal year 15-16. So you can see that property taxes represent roughly 2/3 of our budgeted revenue. Obviously, the largest source. However, it was interesting for me to note that looking backwards, so if I went back to fiscal year 2008-9, property taxes represented 80% of revenues. So there's definitely been some diversification of revenues that's happened over that time period. And that's primarily come about through the medic cost recovery category of revenues, which is now the second largest source of revenues and representing about 27% of budgeted revenues. And then there are much smaller percentages, as you can see, for the other revenue categories. Overall, we are budgeting for general fund revenues in fiscal 15-16 of $187 million, which represents a $3.4 million increase compared to preliminary unaudited revenues of revenues for 14-15. The biggest contributors to that increase are that we're projecting an additional $5.2 million in property taxes, which is roughly a 4.3% increase versus 14-15 property tax revenues. So at preliminary budget, we have been projecting about a 4.7% increase. That was revised downwards to 4.3%, but still is representing a significant increase over 14-15. The other revenue source that's contributing to the increase is that we are budgeting to receive $1.2 million in prior year GEMT revenue. These are GEMT revenues that are associated with activity in fiscal 9-10 and 10-11 that have been held up as the result of an unrelated audit. So this is we know we're going to get it revenue, but we just don't know when. We had budgeted to receive it last year and ended up removing that revenue from the budget at mid-year because it didn't look as if we would receive it in 14-15. We're taking a similar approach this year. We'll continue to monitor it. When we get to mid-year budget, it doesn't appear as if we will receive the revenue, then we would revisit at that time. But I do want to point out that it is a one-time revenue source, so it goes, assuming we get it this year, it goes away next year.
Ms. Thomas, can I ask a question?
Yes.
For efficiency's sakes, gentlemen, when we go to these slides, if you have a question, why don't we ask it when the slide is up so that we can clarify any issues, so that when we get back and we're going through resolutions, we've clarified any issues. So as you see these issues come up, if you have a question, let's address it while the slide's up so that we can get it clarified. Because once we're done with the presentation and when we start moving into our adoption of each of the resolutions, at that point, we probably aren't going to have a lot of conversation. We're just going to move right on through the resolutions and approve them one at a time. So Ms. Thomas, if that's okay with you, if one of the directors has a question while the slide is up, maybe we can address it then. Does that work okay for you?
That works perfectly for me.
Okay. Go ahead. Director Rosali, did you?
Well, actually, I did. Realizing that you don't have any greater crystal ball than anyone else, but in looking at your projections, now we're looking at 15, 16. Do you see a time, assuming current trends increase, when we'll be back to previous funding levels?
When you say previous funding levels, you mean previous total revenues?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I think we actually already are at that time, but the other side of the equation is that our expenses are higher than they've ever been also. For some of the reasons that I talked about on the earlier slide. So we've got these additional $2 million in costs for retirement, medical, workers' comp, those things that are not the result of adding employees, they're just the result of escalation of those costs. So I think, that's why we're ending up in a situation where, where our revenues are $1 million less than our expenditure requirements, essentially. But yes, we're looking at property tax revenues for 16, 17 that are approximately where they were in the 8, 9 period. So we're getting back to that property tax revenue level. And then on top of that, we have, as I mentioned, diversified revenue. So we're now getting more in medic cost recovery, both from the ambulance fees, the GEMT, and the IGT than we have previously.
Fine, thank you.
Your question?
Other, Ms. Thomas, I have a question. Either you or the other experts in the room can answer. When is it that Metro Fire doesn't get asked to come to everything? I mean, we're an all-risk agency that has the best equipment and people, and I guess I'm wondering how it is that Metro Fire is not going to be asked to be deployed to the tune of nearly $3 million worth of deployment reimbursement. And so I guess I'm trying to envision how the rest of the world's going to function without using Metro Fire's people and equipment. I'm having a hard time. And so when I see almost $3 million in decrease, I wonder where those requests are going to go. Is some other fire department moved in that I'm unaware of, and they have strike teams that go? So chiefs, I'd like to know
I
where
can
we're-
actually address that. So actually, those last two items, those are decreases because we're not reflecting the revenues or the expenses associated with them, whereas we were in 14, 15.
an
So
accounting thing.
it's a bit of an accounting thing. It's a budgeting thing. So specifically for the deployment reimbursements, we typically add that back in at mid-year
Yeah.
because we have a much better idea of what our actual activity up until that point has been, and we're able to gauge what a more reasonable number for the year is. So we're not including the expenses or the revenues at this point in final budget, whereas both the expenses and the revenues obviously are included in the 14, 15 actual numbers.
So this isn't actually, we're going to be asked to reduce our contributions to the region. We'll probably be asked to do more. This is more of how we're going to reflect that in our budgets.
Right, so you will see that at mid-year budget, we'll come back with an estimate at that time of what we think both the reimbursement will be and then the total expenditures associated with the deployment.
Okay.
In a-
Good.
In a
Makes me a little more-
in a deployment model, I mean, strictly from finances, yes, but I would tell you, we're always going to be the ones that are
Yeah.
called. And quite frankly, we benefit locally by all that experience that we get externally, both incident management teams and, tactical, strategic on the ground. So, no, it's all good stuff, but it is fully reimbursed back through the state and feds.
Well, that makes me feel more comfortable, because when I saw that, I'm like, what? How's that going to work? There's no way Metro can't be going to everything, right? It's just who we are. So, okay, it's a budget. It's a accounting deal. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. So with this chart, we're actually transitioning over to the expenditure side of things. This chart is showing the breakdown of general fund expenditures, which I want to point out doesn't include transfers, but just expenditures within the general fund by type of expenditure. As you can see, labor represents the largest source of expenditures at about 80.8% of general fund budgeted expenditures for 15-16. Services and supplies account for 17.4% of budgeted expenditures. And I do want to point out here that services and supplies expenditures include the transfer that we make for the IGT. So there's about $10.5 million that we transfer to get the roughly $17 million back. So that $10.5 million is included in the services and supplies expenditure.
One clarifier on that too, and the labor percentage is always a bone of contention on this particular slide. And just understand, this is the entire budget and not renewable revenues specifically as a comparison of labor. So just for clarifying.
And then finally, the third category of expenditures, taxes, licenses, assessments, and contributions, obviously much smaller, just under 2% of the budget. So looking at the labor budget for 15-16, there's a total amount of $149 million budgeted for labor. As I mentioned earlier, that's up $7 million compared to the 14-15 actual expenditures. And so some of the significant assumptions contributing to that include about $5 million for academies, both fire and SRP academies, to pay both the recruits and the instructors. $3 million for filling vacant line positions with those recruits that are coming out of the academy. Reopening an engine company, as we've talked about this evening, that's an additional $1.2 million of costs for that period from October 1st through the end of the fiscal year. And then offsetting those increases partially is a reduction in constant staffing overtime of $7 million. So as we fill those line positions, there's less of a need for constant staffing overtime, and we're seeing that savings here in the $7 million. I will point out that we don't really capture the full savings in 15-16, and we don't see that until we get to 16-17, so you'll see that number go down even more in 16-17. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have a $2 million net increase as a result of the SAFER grant expiring in 14-15. So that was $2.4 million in funding, mitigated by about $400,000 of savings for the conversion. Net position adjustments of about $600,000. And then finally, we are assuming a conversion of SRPs from hourly to salary employees. That's contributing $100,000 roughly, but there's some administrative efficiencies that are going along with it, which is why we're doing it. We expect it to provide for efficiencies in how that time is processed and ultimately to be a better solution. In addition to those assumptions that I just went over, there are other impacts that are unrelated to staffing changes, some of which I've mentioned. So retirement, we saw a $1 million increase just as a result of increased retirement rates. However, and this is a change from the preliminary budget, we're able to offset that partially by paying a portion of our employer retirement contribution upfront at the beginning of the year, as opposed to throughout the year. And by doing that, we're saving $600,000. In addition, we're seeing a $600,000 increase as a result of higher medical premiums. We had estimated that at about $500,000 at preliminary budget. We have the actual premium rates from CalPERS now, so we were able to come up with a better estimate. Unfortunately, it's higher, $600,000. We're seeing a $500,000 increase as a result of workers' compensation. And I want to point out this is really because in 14-15, our experience was lower than the historical average. We came in at a much lower year, but if you look historically, the amount that we're budgeting for 15-16 appears to be the appropriate amount. So we're really seeing that increase as a result of 14-15 being low and 15-16 being budgeted as a normal year. However, we're currently having an actuarial study conducted, and if it appears that we need to sort of revise our assumptions going forward, we'll do that at the next time we revisit the budget. And then finally, we have a $400,000 increase for OPEB, and that's just as a result of the ARC being $400,000 higher this year compared to last year due to actuarial assumptions. What are not factored into these numbers are a couple things that we've already touched on. So we're not including any potential impacts as a result of labor negotiations. We're also not including any costs related to deployments. So we don't have the revenues. We also don't have the expenses related to deployments. Is there a question?
There is. Just a point of clarification, where it talks about retirement at $1 million in an increased rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that talking about more people retiring, or the rate that they're being paid is increasing?
The rate that we pay to CalPERS.
I see.
Yes. So this has nothing to do with adding employees. It's simply the cost related to, the CalPERS rate for the employees that we already have.
And you're saying we have a $600,000 benefit by early payment.
Correct.
So we need to be doing that,
Right?
That's a good thing.
Yes, so we did that this year, and we're also reflecting that we would continue to do that going forward into 16-17. So moving on to services and supplies expenses, the total services and supplies budget for fiscal 15-16 is $32.2 million. That's a $2.2 million increase compared to 14-15 actual. So some of the items contributing to that increase are listed here. The rebudgeting of amounts that were budgeted but not expended in 14-15 is contributing to about $700,000 of that increase. We also have a one-time payment for the district's share of the new CAD system that Chief Holbrook discussed, about $300,000. Again, that's one time. So the reason it's not the number that you heard him say is because the Comm Center JPA has an amount already in their capital improvement fund that will be used to offset some of the cost, and then the remaining cost is being distributed among the agencies. So our share is $300,000. And finally, contributing to additional costs in services and supplies, we have costs for fire academies, turnouts, employee medicals, essentially things related to recruiting and training new employees, as well as medic supplies and building maintenance costs contributing to the increase. The third and final category of expenditures in the general fund are debt service assessments and contributions with a total budget of $3.4 million. The largest portion of that is a $1.8 million assessment that gets paid to the county for collection of and administration of property taxes. And then additionally, we have debt service payments in the general fund of $1.3 million. $800,000 of that for the lease revenue bonds, $300,000 for IT equipment financing, and then the newest item is there's $200,000 for the Stryker Gurney subscription, and that's basically what we're seeing in an increase from 14-15 to 15-16 is that item.
That's the auto load.
So in addition to the expenditures in the general fund revenues are also transferred to meet expenditure requirements in other funds, primarily the Capital Facilities Fund. So there's a total transfer from the general fund budget of $3.1 million. As you can see, nearly all of that is going to the Capital Facilities Fund to fund capital expenditures and debt service. There are minor amounts that are being transferred to other funds, really to, as a result of the county over allocating interest in the past and now that needing to be paid back. So you'll be adopting resolutions for those funds, even though there's no other budget associated with those funds. I wanted to list that out so you could see what they were for.
You said the county gave us too much money, now they want it back?
Something
I'm
like that.
sorry. Really? I didn't know how that worked. It's not how my parents gave me my allowance. Cool. How much is that gonna cost us?
$19,328.
Oh, okay.
These amounts and these funds are being paid out after the amounts are being transferred from the general fund.
Could we pay that back over time,
Yeah.
say 100 years?
I'll let you make that request. And then finally, there's a $40,000 transfer in from reserves that's related to prior year deferred compensation program revenue that's used to offset deferred compensation expenses in the general fund. So those are the transfers out and in for the general fund. So this table shows the general fund budget for fiscal 16-17 compared to 15-16. As Chief Wells mentioned earlier, we're not recommending adoption of a 15-16 budget, but we did think it was useful to look at that for informational purposes because the big thing that it helps to do
You
is.
do want us to approve 15-16?
Sorry, yes, I do.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I was just saying.
I don't
no,
want you to
think
approve 16-17.
Okay, there you
I
go.
apologize if I
Oh,
misspoke.
that's all right.
Yes, please approve 15-16.
Okay.
But what 16-17 shows is, when we say we can't afford something in 15-16, we'll put it off to next year. Well, now we see what next year looks like. So I think it's helpful for that purpose. And as you can see by looking in the middle column, which is the 16-17 budget, we're showing a roughly $2.3 million deficit in 16-17 compared to the $1 million deficit in 15-16. When we look, a little bit more closely at 16-17 for revenues, we've got basically an overall $5 million increase relative to 15-16. Roughly half of that from an assumed increase in property taxes. It is incorporating a relatively conservative projection of 2% for property tax growth for 16-17. That's sort of an industry standard for future years. As we get closer to 1617, more information will be available. Our property tax consultant will be able to make a more informed estimate. Obviously, we'll use that to inform future budget projections, but as of right now, we're assuming a 2% increase in property taxes for 1617. We are seeing that $1.2 million reduction because the one-time GEMT revenue that we're budgeting in 15-16, we don't have in 16-17. And then we're also assuming $3.4 million of additional revenue associated with financing the P25 portable radio replacement program. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I get down to expenditures, but just keep in mind that that revenue is in here to offset the expenditures. So talking about expenditures, the labor budget for 16-17, as I mentioned earlier, is showing reduced constant staffing overtime because we're getting the full impact of the recruits this year that get hired, but we don't see the full impact of until 16-17. And that reduction is partially offset by assumed increases in medical and retirement rates. The services and supplies budget for 16-17 shows an increase of $6.5 million, and that's largely due to large one-time purchases, so the P25, and then we also have SCBA replacement, where we're budgeting $2 million for that in 16-17. Now, I did want to mention on P25, we are budgeting for that in 16-17, or showing that budget in 16-17. However, it looks like we'll have the opportunity to be coming before you to recommend accelerating that purchase into 15-16 to save a substantial amount of money by joining with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department in their purchase. That's not reflected in this budget, but it does look like something that's going to make sense to move that purchase forward in order to save a significant amount, potentially around $2 million off the total cost of the program. Keep in mind that we had assumed that it would be financed, so that's not a $2 million budget impact, but it's a $2 million long-term savings. So we likely will be coming before the board with a recommendation on that, as well as how we would recommend that that get financed. Not reflected in the budget today, but did want to mention that.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and ask about that if I could. On the P25, since it's becoming a national standard on the digital radios, are there opportunities for grants to help purchase that, since we are now kind of being forced to go to the digital age on the radios? I mean, I know we're projecting for that. I think that's great, and regionalize it. I think that's going to help cut costs, but with Mr. Davis's savvy, are we able to look at grants that might help cover some of those costs? Are we aware of any at this time?
I'll jump in here real quick. And Tyler might be the answer would be yes, if there's anything possible that we would absolutely be aggressively going after it. I would tell you this, though, and one of the interesting things about this emerging thing on the P25, Captain Wagaman and Scott Andrews came to us recently, and these guys are working very, very hard, and they literally got this phenomenal opportunity to hop in with another large, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, as you well know, is a very large, robust law enforcement agency with lots of radios. So when you combine the two buying powers together, they've gotten this down to an extremely, like literally saving potentially over a 5-year financing plan or something of about $2 million out of a total budget of about twice that. And so really a great opportunity. And then they'd finance it over time. So I don't think we're going to have to come out of pocket. And yes, if we could get a federal grant for it, that would be fantastic. I think the problem with that, though, is everybody's going to be looking for that. And there's a ton of savings associated with this, with being able to not have to pay for flashing of mobile radios and things. So Tyler, if you have any further questions, that exceeded my capability on that. But if you have any further questions, just a great opportunity, but it happened really recently, and to the point of we don't know exactly what it looks like, and that's why it's not in this year's budget. But looking long-term, it looks really good.
Well, and I'm also wondering if, given the change in our comm center with CAD and all those, our member agencies in our dispatch center ought to jump in, and we ought to try to, if we can get $2 million by linking up with the sheriff, maybe we can get some more savings by having our sister fire agencies that we're already part of a JPA in our dispatch to jump on board with that. Because I really see that as we join forces regionally and we get these P25 vendors, when we talk about an entire region purchasing, we can drive the cost down even further, as is evidenced by the CAD negotiations that were just explained to us, further allowing this agency to save money and be able to expend it in other places in 16, 17 that will be important as well. So I really hope that there's this mindset amongst our colleagues in all public safety in the region that y'all got to go to P25, it sounds like. It's not an option. It will happen. So why not try to put your budgets together in 15, 16 for a 16, 17 expenditure, and everybody wins because we're buying in such large volumes that all agencies have significant savings. And so that may need to come up on somebody's radar, like the board, that we go out and talk to our fellow councils and so on and so forth to try to get those politicians to understand how it benefits everyone. I see that Captain Wagaman has stepped up.
I'm here once again, thank you.
You
Regarding the grant opportunity, about 4 years ago, there was an AFG grant locally. It was a regional grant for P25 radios. We weren't not involved in that grant. I cannot tell you the specifics as to why, but it was a West Sacramento, City of Sacramento, and Galt, I believe, grant. So they are P25 compliant as of today. Within this year, this city local government has completed their purchase with a very large number of radios. This leaves Sac County Sheriff as one of the last largest agencies on our system to make a purchase. Exceeding 1,000 radios is really the mark that we need to hit before we start seeing significant savings. If we do not catch this opportunity, there will not be another large purchase within this region on this radio system, and that's a concern of ours.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
And we have, I believe, tossed it out to the other groups. The problem is it's quick. I mean, we're jumping in on this at a very last minute opportunity. There's not a lot of time in order to take advantage of this.
Oh, dang time. Okay, excellent. Any other questions about this issue? Thank you very much. Let's go on.
Okay, and so just to finish out the slide here, at the very last bullet, there's a $5 million transfer to the Capital Facilities Fund in 16-17 to fund capital expenditures and debt service. So moving from the general fund to talk about the Capital Facilities Fund, this table shows the Capital Facilities Fund budget for 15-16 and 16-17. I probably should have mentioned when I talked about the general fund earlier that starting with 15-16, we've changed our budgeting practice so that all capital expenditures are budgeted in the Capital Facilities Fund. We have no capital expenditures budgeted in the general fund. So you're seeing all of that activity happen here in the Capital Facilities Fund, and really the revenue is coming into the general fund and is being transferred to the Capital Facilities Fund to offset those expenditures. And so just in terms of how this table is laid out, you can see the final 15-16 column there, 2 over, and then final 16-17. So those are the 2 budget years that we'll be talking about. Revenues in the fund really consist entirely of financing proceeds. So we have financing proceeds that are offsetting some of the capital expenditures, which you can see listed under expenditures. And then the revenues minus the expenditures, or whatever expenditures are not financed, as well as the debt service as a result of that financing. So you can see that in fiscal 15-16, we have about a $3.5 million requirement in the Capital Facilities Fund that's met with a $3.1 million transfer in from the general fund, that's what 212A is, and then a $400,000 transfer in from the Leased Properties Fund, that's 212L. And then looking over to the right for 16-17, there's about a $5 million requirement in the Capital Facilities Fund. So in terms of the detail behind that, in 15-16, there's $11.4 million of capital outlay, and we're assuming $10.6 million of that would be financed. The largest piece is the burn tower at the Zinfandel training site, so that's a $7 million cost, which would be financed over 20 years. So there's a debt service piece associated with that. Additionally, 7 Type 3 ambulances and 2 remounts for a total cost of $1.6 million. I did want to point out that about $600,000 of that is rebudgeted from 14-15 into 15-16. We're also budgeting for a heavy rescue of $1.2 million in the 15-16 budget, and a station alerting upgrade of $400,000. So those are the capital outlay items. In addition to that, we have $2.7 million of debt service in the capital facilities fund. Looking at 16-17, oh, yes, question.
Thank you. You're a good teacher. The question I have, and this may go to the EMS folks, is do remounts really work for us, given our high call volume? I mean, do we really save, you know, we beat these ambulances up pretty decently with the mileage that we put on, and I'm just wondering, Chief, have you put remounts into your budget because you expect that we might need to remount a couple, but they still got a good power plant under them, but for whatever reason, we got to change the box out? Is that kind of historically what you've done in your division?
Historically, this particular item, those remounts were actually carryovers from the previous year. There's been a long delay in actually getting the chassis, and so we don't pay for them until they actually arrive. And so with that long delay, it's actually pushed it over to the next budget year. Okay. We do have a medic spec committee looking at those, and the ability to do a remount versus a new unit. We're looking at the value between the two.
Right, because I'm assuming with the new rigs you've got running around, what would you remount?
Right, so there's two different types of units. There's
Right.
a van type, and then we also have a type 3 or a mod type.
Right.
And so
Are we going to continue to have those in this fleet?
the medic spec committee is looking at that right now, and they should have a recommendation to go to the fire chief soon.
But I think for clarification though, when we do a remount, we take the box off and buy a new chassis and put the box back on a new chassis.
Correct.
So the thing that's getting most of the wear and tear is getting replaced, not the patient
Not the power,
compartment.
yeah. Sure, no, I understand what that, I'm just thinking, looking forward, as we buy more and more of the van type rigs, and they seem to work in our system, and when we were first presented with that item as a board, there were so many items that came in front of us that,
Right.
look at how much savings these things are compared to our modular units, that it doesn't seem to me like going forward, we would be looking at purchasing more of those types of ambulances in our system, but it sounds like you've got a committee that's looking at it, and maybe they'll say we don't even need those remounts, and that money and will be saved in some way.
Absolutely, and those costs are starting to come together. They're starting to narrow between a purchase of a new unit and a remount unit, so that's why we're looking at that.
Got it, okay, excellent.
Question for you, Chief.
Chief, I think you got
I
another.
have one other question there. When you talk about the delays,
Yes.
what's causing the delays?
The delay is there are not many manufacturers that are purchasing the van cutaways or manufacturing the van cutaways. And so everybody is trying to get the last of that stock that's out there. So that's what's causing the delay.
And ultimately, that'll just be phased out, or how do you see that being resolved?
That is correct. So there'll be very few options. You'll either have to go to a gas engine or you'll have to switch to a completely different model. So a truck mounted type vehicle as opposed to a van cutaway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, so looking at fiscal 16-17 and the capital facilities fund, we're budgeting for $9.3 million of capital outlay, and assuming that 7.9 of that would be financed. Looking at the debt service figure in 16-17, that's $3.5 million. So you can compare that number to the $2.7 million of debt service in 15-16 and see the impact of, financing these additional purchases. Obviously, that's adding to more debt service in the future. This table shows the budget for the grant fund for 15-16 and 16-17, which at this point includes approximately $200,000 of grant revenues and expenses for fiscal 15-16. However, I do want to point out on this slide, not reflected in the budget is that we were recently notified of award of approximately $400,000 for a residential care facility inspection program grant, and we do anticipate making a recommendation to the board regarding that grant and would make any necessary budget adjustments as a result of that.
Yeah, and that's obviously in a meet and confer process, not so much for the grant period, but for, it's actually a personnel cost that we can increase. And it's a great opportunity for us in that I know we have a joint agreement with labor that's a great idea moving forward, and it's part of that whole revitalization of the Community Risk Reduction Division. So another grant getting us started, and we'll be able to sustain it. But it's still preliminary, and it's happening as we speak in between timelines for Brown Act for posting of budgets, et cetera. So more to come on that in the next number of board meetings.
The state gave us $77. That's awesome.
You're going to make me look at this.
That's great. Good for them.
Yes, apparently so. Okay, so the last fund that I'll discuss tonight is the Leased Properties Fund. And this is the fund that captures the revenue and expenditures for our leased properties. As you can see by looking at the 15, 16, and the 16, 17 columns, we are anticipating a surplus in this fund for each of those years. And in 15, 16, that surplus of about $400,000, we're budgeting to transfer to the Capital Facilities Fund. And what that's doing is that's reducing the amount that needs to get transferred from the general fund to fund those expenditures. So that really wraps up the discussion of each of the funds. In summary, again, while we're only recommending adoption of the budget for 15-16, we did think it's important to show 16-17 because it does capture the impact of those expenditure deferrals. We know that we can't defer, those mandated purchases and other capital maintenance needs indefinitely. So we are showing those happening in 16-17 and the result of that. The projected deficits in each of 15-16 and 16-17 do result in reduced reserve ratios. So we ended 14-15 at 12.5% reserve. With the $1 million deficit in 15-16, we expect that would be 11.4% at the end of 15-16. And then with the additional $2.3 million deficit that we're showing as of right now for 16-17, we expect that would be 9.7%. So, as was the case for 15-16, we will continue to refine revenue projections for 16-17 and even for this current year as more information becomes available. But if we don't see an improved revenue picture, we will need to explore expenditure reductions going into 16-17 in order to come to a balanced budget. So our recommendation is for the adoption of the final budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016. And I'd be happy to take any additional questions.
Okay, members of the board, Director Wood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Amanda. Another excellent opportunity, another excellent presentation. I have two things. One of them is probably better directed over to the Chief and Melissa. Like I mentioned last week, our ability to get information out to people is unparalleled here. And another fine example of that, is there a way to get this information on the website so people, members of the public and our employees who want to learn about this detail can do so? I'm particularly interested in that slide with the blocks describing the $7 million shift. That was an excellent visual graph that should help anyone who has questions about what we're doing with a surplus and how we get to that deficit. It should be very easy to digest. Is there a way to get that up?
I'm sure we can work to get some of that information on our website, and additionally, we will post the final budget when it is passed.
The budget's a little meaty, and so for those who like something simple, instead of just, this presentation's really good at that. The other question more for you, Ms. Thomas, unfunded liabilities don't show up anywhere in here. I thought we were supposed to be recognizing those in our, well, these financial statements are different than budgets, but
Correct.
is that something that's appropriate in this discussion, or will we have those discussions as we get to the final financial statements?
So we'll definitely have those discussions when we get to the financial statements, which I think we anticipate to happen by January timeframe. I think we'll have a pretty substantial discussion about those there. They only show up in the budget to the extent that we're paying them off. So you see them in the form of, the debt service and the amounts that we're setting aside for the pension obligation fund, obviously the amounts that we're paying in retirement that go to that liability, and in other amounts, we have an amount that we're paying to SCRS, Sacramento County Employers Retirement System, for a liability there. But I think we'll have a more full discussion of those unfunded liabilities and what those total amounts are when we get to the financial statements.
In the future, like when we talk about the debt service, is it possible to put in a footnote what that relates to in our budget? So we know
Sure.
that this particular debt service relates to a future expense of $250 million or whatever it
Or
ties
what
to.
the total amount outstanding is.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can certainly look at doing that.
thanks.
Okay, other questions? Go ahead, Director Morris.
The only question I have, and when you broke it down to the tiles, I'll tell you that was very helpful for me, because to wrap my head around a lot of these numbers, that's why you're the experts. In the beginning, Chief, you'd mentioned that there was, I think, a $3 million that went into the reserve. Is that correct? Roughly, I don't know the exact number that was said.
You mean, you're talking about the surplus that,
Correct. That raised it, because we have a 15% for our reserve as our targeted goal.
oh, yeah, that's a total general fund, I believe, of 15% is the target policy of the board. Correct.
Okay, now it sounded like there was money rolled in that. Was that captured in there? And if it was, I apologize for not seeing that.
Right, so the $7 million surplus from 14-15, I think if that's your question, that would be reflected in the 12.5% reserve ratio that we had at the end of 14-15. And then we're starting at that point moving forward into 15-16, where we're projecting $1 million deficit, which is bringing that reserve ratio down.
Okay.
Because we're taking out of reserves to fund that deficit.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, if I could, it seems like in the not-too-distant past, we had a $187 million budget. But what I wanted to commend the district for, and certainly your staff, because I know that you do a lot of the lifting to try and help these gentlemen figure out how to do the things that they, believe in their vision. I just think it's wonderful that we're reopening a resource, especially in the Anatolia area. And to see resources brought back online is a direction that this district should be going in. Certainly, we have been down for a number of years, and we have dealt with it the very best we could. And I think that as I call this organization the high-performing organization that it is, here we are in an opportunity to restore services. And I think it's wonderful to see the district doing that. So thank you again for the hard work that you have done to make sure that the vision and everything else that these gentlemen that are experts in the fire service believe that this district needs to accomplish. Thank you for helping them do that. And thank you again for a wonderful report.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of the board? All right, so what I'd like to do at this time, before we begin the action items, Chief,
Actually, we had one more,
I got it. I'm just about ready to do that. If everyone just, before we begin the action items and start taking these resolutions one at a time and approving them, I'm going to open up for comment to the public, any issues that relate to this, and discuss these issues, because we are passing a budget this evening that will move forward, and we want to allow for an opportunity for all those that it will impact to have an opportunity for public comment. With that, Captain Bailey, I'd like you to start, and then we'll go from there. So,
Thank you.
time is now yours.
Thank you, Board of Directors, Chief Wells. Yeah, I moved quick there because I didn't know if you're going to move to a vote.
No,
so
I
got
know. I was
prepped.
prepped.
Where we were 15 months ago when we were looking at deficits in the budget, possible reduction of services again, and where we're at today is a significant change. And it's a little, I know we're not where we want to be 100% necessarily, but it's a breath of fresh air knowing that we're increasing our workforce, we're bringing new employees into this department and restoring services. And that's very important to Local 522. Not only to serve our communities, but also for the safety of the men and women who are out there running those calls. So I appreciate that. We did have a meet and confer over the PAD, and I want to reiterate what Chief Wells said. Local 522 does agree with those positions. It's about safety, your education, and most important, the training that we need to provide to the members that support the public. So we do support those positions. One thing I'd like to add is we had an unrepresented position on the PAD that we were able to negotiate and get that as a local 522 position and as the deputy fire marshal position. Previous, it was an unrepresented position. So that's another position that we will be adding to local 522, and I appreciate you guys taking your time, talking that out, and coming back and agreeing to that. So thank you. Lastly, and of course not least, I want to thank Amanda and her staff. Over the last 15 months, we might have asked for a few things here and there. Maybe. You know, the budget is very complex, and we need we need all the information that we ask for in order to make, you know, educated decisions. So I want to thank Amanda and her staff for that and providing that, as well as other staff members of Metro Fire who are involved with that. So we do appreciate that. And then lastly, I want to reiterate that Local 522 does support opening Engine 68, and we would like you as a board to also support that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Captain. Other comments from the public relative to the 2015-16 final budget for Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District? Any other comments? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll now move on to action items of my colleagues. We'll begin this by, I'll entertain a motion to adopt Resolution A.
Mr. Chair, I'll move we adopt Resolution A, the 2015-16 final budget for General Operating Fund 212A.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second on Resolution A. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll take a motion for Resolution B.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we approve Resolution B, the 2015-16 final budget for Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
I have a first.
Second.
And I have a second. Madam Clerk, any questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion for Resolution C as in Charlie.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we adopt Resolution C, the 2015-16 final budget for Pension Obligation Bonds Fund 212E.
I have a first
Second.
and I have a second. Madam Clerk, any questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll entertain a motion for Resolution D.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion that we adopt Resolution D, the 2015-16 final budget for Other Post-Employment Benefits Fund 212F.
I have a first.
Second.
I have a second. Questions? Madam Clerk?
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
We'll move on to Resolution E.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we pass Resolution E, 2015-16 final budget for grant funds 212G.
I have a first.
Second.
I have a second. Questions? Madam Clerk?
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Resolution F. I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to pass Resolution F, 2015-16 final budget for Development Impact Fees Fund 212, and I believe it's I.
I have a first.
Second.
I have a triple. Questions relative to this item? Madam Clerk?
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll now move to Resolution G. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to pass Resolution G, 2015-16 final budget for Lease Properties Fund 212L.
I
Second.
have a first and a second. Questions relative to this resolution? Hearing none, seeing none. Madam Clerk?
Director Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion for Resolution H.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to pass Resolution H, 2015-16 final budget for Simulator Fund 212S.
I have a first.
Second.
I have a second. Questions on Resolution H?
Director Rosali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll entertain a motion for our staff report and Resolution I.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we adopt Staff Resolution I, the 2015-16 appropriations limit.
I have a first.
Second.
And I have a second. Any questions or comments on Resolution I? Madam Clerk?
Director Rosali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Congratulations on all that work, and good things are happening. We'll now move forward with opening up that station ASAP. An important thing, as all the other things. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to do is quickly move through our reports. We do have a closed session item this evening, and so what we'll do is we'll move all the way through and complete board members' questions and comments, and then you all can go home, and we'll stay in labor for hours while you're sleeping, and we'll go into closed session. So we'll move through these reports quickly, I promise you, since it is late in the evening and we want to get you all home. So with that, I'll start. President's report. I want to reaffirm our support for the Rio Linda Rec and Park group that is working, and the whole crew that's working on the renovation of Old 111. You know, that's a fantastic thing that people on their own time are looking forward and backwards at the same time relative to the history of these agencies. And, you know, that's a unique hobby to do, and we need to continue to support them. And I hope I have the support of my colleagues relative to taking this group out on a field trip, as it were. I remember many moons ago when we did that, and there was a lot of positive comments from the community. And I think it's a small thing that we can do to show our appreciation for all the countless hours that go into restoring history. You know, we're all getting older, and so we need to, you know, appreciate the history, because one day our coconuts will be shown up there as historic figures. I know Director Woods will be. With that, I'll turn it over to the chief. Chief, your report.
Well, thank you. So this evening on my report, first I'd like to thank everybody at Metro Fire, the staff that's working very, very hard, and specifically everybody that had a lot to do with this budget. I mean, Amanda and your staff, great effort tonight. Thank you, and the number of weeks and months that it takes to put this together, and also the information from every division as it feeds the budget. We went through a long budget process this year, and I can tell you it's been a really good process, so that in future years our budgets are really going to be stellar, I believe, and maybe not always financially, but I can tell you in the way they're prepped and done, it's really an exciting time for us, I think, moving forward. So thank you for everybody's work on that. Actually, on the 8th of September, I was out at the Citrus Heights Chamber of Commerce luncheon with Assistant Chief Ellis and Community Risk Specialist Michelle Cummings. Had the opportunity to address the group about all risk and what we do in the community. I think it is when, you know, we take it for granted what we do, but I think most people think we're traditionally a fire department that goes on fires and EMS types of calls, which we do, but we do a lot of other things as well, and I think it's always a good opportunity to see the reaction from the community when we speak about those. I was also on the 9th of September, I was on KFBK again. That's the second Wednesday of every month. Stay tuned for those at 8:10 in the morning for my opportunity to address the nation from that platform. Very exciting. I do appreciate the opportunity that we get there, and Michelle does a great job of lining those up for us. We had a great meeting yesterday with the Rancho Cordova 2x2 meeting that we had. We talked about issues relevant to both agencies, to include the burn tower and that process, weed abatement issues as they go, Station 61 and the plans for future growth in Rancho. Clearly, they're on track, but it's a long track at this point. But we're really excited about that opportunity to talk with the city of Rancho Cordova, a great working relationship. And also the EOP plan that you all saw last week, or last board meeting, we had the opportunity to share with the electeds in Rancho Cordova, and myself and Chief Ellis spoke to the City of Citrus Heights Chamber of Commerce and Mayor Frost up there, and she's excited about that opportunity as well. We had, as discussed, some very good meet and confer sessions with Local 522 regarding the budget and the position authorization document. Those went well. Our next town hall meeting will be in November, on November 3rd, from 10 to noon at Station 21 is where that's scheduled at this time. Tomorrow, of course, is a very significant event in our nation's history, and I want to make sure that everybody is fully involved in their remembrance of that event and in their individual ways and publicly as they were. Tomorrow there'll be a stair climb starting at the Renaissance Tower, 801 K Street. It's actually not really an open event, but fire department personnel can go and our members and board members and observe that. And it's in honor of the 343 fallen firefighters at FDNY on September 11th, and also 72, just for notification, obviously. A lot of military soldiers died at the Pentagon that day, and also at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and also law enforcement, 72 in the trade towers at the World Trade Center, and then obviously thousands of civilians. So definitely a difficult day in our nation's history, but we will be climbing the stairs. A group of us, myself and Chief Taylor, I believe, in this group, tomorrow evening we'll have sore calves, I'm sure. But we'll be honored to carry the name of a fallen all the way up the stairs, 110 flights, to honor their memory and sacrifice. Also tomorrow, we're very excited to be part of the Hometown Heroes Parade downtown. True American heroes that were overseas in France and had the opportunity to thwart a terrorist attack there. So that'll be happening on Capitol Mall tomorrow at noon. Should be a great opportunity to go out and celebrate their service and sacrifice and heroic actions. Also, there's a 9/11 charity golf tournament that Chief Bridge will be participating in for us. I think he's probably the lowest handicap out of the group anyway, which is fantastic, and because that's not saying much.
You're talking about golf, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
We don't play with the colored ball and just a putter. But so that'll be good, and 9/11 charity event for that out at Slough House. That'll be happening tomorrow. And then on Sunday, there's a Run to Remember, a 5K tribute in the park down on Capitol Mall, also for the 9/11 remembrance, and that'll be at 9:11 a.m. in the morning on the 13th. So it kicks off at 9:11 in the morning. Let's see, we have this coming week, we have Undersecretary Michael Wilkening from the Health and Human Services will be meeting with the EMS staff doing a ride-along for the day. They want to come out and see how the fire service is projecting ourselves in the community in the EMS delivery model, and so great opportunity, and our staff is second to none in my opinion, so it'll be a great opportunity. We have a Fire Station 101 open house on 3000 Fulton Avenue. That'll be Thursday, October 8th from 11 to 2 in the afternoon. And really the showcase of that initially is because of the great improvements that the facilities district and the crews there have done. However, I would like to point out that really the most significant event of that entire opportunity will be to celebrate firefighter Jim Saunders' turnouts. They'll be moved from this location here at headquarters and be placed at their final resting place at Station 101. As you will know, Jim Saunders passed away on duty, and that was his last call out of Station 101. So we're excited and honored to be able to provide that tribute to Jim into perpetuity. And lunch will be provided. And RSVP, please, board directors through Brenda Briggs, and the association will be out there barbecuing. Let's see, it's been busy. We'll keep going here. I'm speaking next week at the Rancho Cordova Community Council at the Rancho Cordova City Hall at 11:30 a.m. Everybody's invited to that. And I will be the 21st to the 24th. A number of us will be down at the Cal Chiefs Conference in Long Beach. Good opportunity to meet with our peers and talk about all the relevant issues in the fire service, in the California Fire Service anyway. And it's most likely I will not be here that night of the board meeting of the 24th, but you'll have somebody, brighter and younger looking probably at this podium. Save the date for a promotion ceremony on the 29th of September. It'll be 5:30 p.m. at our headquarters here, and it'll be 14 personnel honored in these chambers. We're looking forward to that. On the 3rd and 4th of October, we're looking forward to the Capitol Air Show. That'll be daily from 9 to 5 p.m. A lot of operation readiness goes into that. Great celebration for the community and the air show, and Metro Fire supports that heavily. And also the Dean Baker Crab Feed, please put that on your calendars for November 21st. That's always a great opportunity. Dean Baker is one of the best people that any of us, if you ever got the opportunity to know him, it's a tribute crab feed to him, and that is on the 21st of November. Proud to announce that Brad Von Stryver is our new fleet manager, and Brad took over in the division of fleet management. Comes to us with a wealth of experience from both Woodland and most recently in Roseville, and he's stepping into that position very well, and we're happy to have Brad. And retirements, we have Battalion Chief Chris Seiler, 25 years of service, was effective on the 1st of September. And then 23-year firefighter Jeff Lamb retired on the 3rd of September as well. And so at this time, I'm going to turn over to Michelle, there she is, for a quick PIO report. She's doing great work out there, and she can tell it better than I can.
Good evening, Director Gould, President Gould, Directors, Chief Wells. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about tonight. One of them, probably the biggest one, is a story that we had today. That we had a 2-alarm fire on Fair Oaks Boulevard, an apartment complex on Sunday. By the way, I'm losing my voice here. There was 12 units that were damaged during this fire. Well, one of the families that lived there was a man, I'd say 30s, that had 2 small little kids, a 2 and a 3-year-old child. He came up and spoke afterwards. He talked to the battalion chief that was there, who was incident commander, was Chris Reed, and Captain Brian Gonzalez. And he wasn't there to share anything specific. He just wanted to go back in the house and see what he could find. So his apartment, of course, was one of the ones damaged. He went back in and found a photo album that still had some, it was damaged on the outside, but still had, you could see what was inside. Long story short, his wife was killed in a car accident last year. His 2 little tiny kids. He just lost his apartment. It was obviously a really rough year. The compassion that he felt from the people that talked to him, which were Battalion Chief Reed and Captain Gonzalez, completely changed his feeling. And so we met with him today. Battalion Chief Reed came out there on his day off, didn't know it was his day off. He came out there, his wife was sitting in the car, and we met with the family, gave them some quilts that were donated to us, gave them these cute little teddy bears that were donated to us. And Chief Reed was kind enough out of his own heart to say, we put together something from the crews that were out here and gave him some money just to help things start. Made it very clear, this is from the crews. We understand what you're going through. We see this a lot, and we want to help any way we can. This man just lost everything that was important except for his kids. And he was in tears because of the appreciation and the true gratitude he had, just because of the compassion he was felt. It was, you guys did a great job on the fire. Thank you so much. But more importantly, the way you treated me like a real person. And his kids were just happy as could be with their new quilts and their teddy bears, and it was a beautiful thing. We also invited KFBK because they had asked about this man. They came out there and did a story on him, and they're trying to help him set up a GoFundMe account or whatever they can do as a radio station to help him get back on his feet. He lost everything he had. So it was the other side of the fire. We do great things. People out there work hard, put out fires, do whatever needs to be done. Showing the compassion and showing the human side was what made a huge difference in a little family today. So that's the coolest thing that's happened recently. We've also had some other really cool things, but that one was different because it was a man in tears sharing genuine thankfulness. On the not so heavy note, on the lighter note here, we were at the Rosemont Celebration of Community on August 22nd. We had our community services out there, engine company out there, and then we also taught CPR. We taught 200 people CPR that day, which was cool. The following week, we were at Cal OES's preparedness event. Same thing, we had community services out there. We taught about 60 people CPR. Also had the opportunity to get on stage and do a demonstration to everybody. So great opportunities. People are out there making a big difference with community interaction and public impact, so it's been awesome. Last but not least, our viewership for the month of October, we have been super busy, was just over 2.5 million. And in case you don't get clearly what that is that was actually people that were watching when the shows were aired, when the news segments were aired. That converts to a local market publicity value to $202,441. So just over $200,000. huge amount of advertising we're getting, a positive way to reach out to the community and tell them who we are and what we're doing. And that's all I've got, unless anyone has questions.
Questions for the captain? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
One last thing I'd like to just wrap up on that is we had a long-term, not long-term, but he'd been here in the single role program, and he's now in our fire academy. And Rick Walker was the principal, kind of coordinating that hands-only CPR. And this new gentleman, new hire, single role paramedic, Zachary Cornell, has taken that over. And I'd just like to publicly express our appreciation. Those guys are out there doing a great job. Michelle is leading them and taking them out on the road. But they literally have done, I believe, 8 sidewalk CPR events already this year. And, you know, if one of those people goes out and affects a life safety in that, that's just a great effort. So I just wanted to thank him and everybody involved in that. And that concludes my report, unless you have any questions.
Okay, questions for the chief on his report? Hearing none, we'll move to Chief Taylor for the operations report. Chief Taylor.
Good evening again, directors, Chief Wells, staff. I'm going to make this quick because I learned something very early in my career is you never follow something like Michelle just did. So we will talk about just the fire that's going on as all of you look to your southeast, which is the Butte County Fire, or the Butte Fire in Amador and Calaveras County. Currently, the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District has 2 Type 1 OES engines there with 8 personnel. We're taking part of a Type 3 regional strike team, so we have 2 Type 3 engines up there on a regional strike team. Also on an additional regional Type 3 strike team, we have 3 engines, and our Dozer 1 is up there. We also have 4 members from our agency that are part of our all-hazard Sacramento Regional All-Hazard Incident Management team are there. And then throughout the rest of the state, we have other resources out, but like I said, I'm not going to continue on after Michelle's great speech, and I'll just keep you updated via your email unless you have any other questions.
Questions for Chief Taylor? Go ahead, Director.
You mentioned Dozer 1.
Yes, sir.
I may have missed something. Do we have a Dozer 2?
Yes, sir.
We do.
And Dozer 2 is in service right now, continue to protect the community.
Yeah, it's essentially a backup. It's, when the one goes out, it comes in, or when they're training or down for maintenance.
Thanks.
Everybody have a great evening.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Ms. Langenfeld, do you have anything before closed session?
I do not.
Okay, thank you very much. Captain Bailey, anything from the local 522?
No, we're contained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll move to committee delegate reports. Have nothing for the executive committee. We'll move on. Chief Holbrook on Comm Center.
Communication Center JPA has not met since we last reported out to you, and our next meeting is Tuesday, 9 a.m. in these chambers on the 29th of September.
For the big deal, right?
For the big deal.
For the big deal. All right, we'll move on. California Fire Rescue Training JPA, Director Kelly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the JPA will meet again on the 24th. I believe it's the same afternoon as our next evening meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee, Director Wood.
Yeah, the Finance and Audit Committee will meet on Thursday, October 22nd at 5 o'clock in this room.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Director Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Policy Committee met this evening in these chambers regarding and had a presentation from Ms. Maddox, HR, regarding paid sick leave, Assembly Bill 1522 regarding part-time and reserve employees. From recommendations, it's more of clarifications what we might need in those reports just to establish what a shift or what an actual time period where that can accumulate. Next meeting will be Thursday, October 8th in these chambers.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We'll start with board members' questions and comments. The esteemed Director Orzali, we'll start with you.
I will make this brief in that this budget, I so appreciate the work that went into putting this budget together. I know how laborious that is, and it was a great job. I am so pleased to hear that we were able to reopen a station, and it makes it a little easier to understand the passing of a budget that runs in deficit. Our job, first and foremost, is to provide service to the community, and this does that well. So thank everyone for their efforts on this.
Thank you, Director. Director Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, the only thing I want to talk about just real briefly is Station 59. I think it was on September 2nd. There was a fatal crash on Jackson Highway that involved 2 families, 2 fatalities, living members of a wife and children. The reason why I bring that up is it talks about the great service Metro Fire provides, but also what they see on a day-to-day basis. There were comments in lot of media reports that the woman, two Good Samaritans showed up to help pull people from the crash, and the woman was screaming, "I just lost everything. My children are in the car." When personnel show up to that chaotic scene, they're not only providing life-saving measures to the living, but also have to understand that there is death involved in some of this, in which they take that home. So I ask everybody to be considerate of the families, but also recognize the great work the men and women of Metro Fire do. They take that home to their families. Those nights they go home and hug their loved ones a little tighter when those things happen. So I just want to thank the members, understand the impact on that, and again, first-class organization. So.
Well said, Director Barnes. We'll move on to Director Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, again, I reiterate the comments that I made earlier and want to offer congratulations to those individuals that are receiving promotions or have received promotions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Kelly. Director Wood.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to the Chief Wells, to Chief Taylor for your help. I got to spend last Friday with the good folks at Station 62, Rich Turner, Jeff Inserti, I apologize if I mispronounce his name, James Doyle, Captain Graff, David Burnett, Kevin Hansen, and Aaron Todd. Incredibly hospitable, warm, wonderful guys. I apparently was a jinx to them on the ride along. We did not have a call until 3 in the afternoon. It was quite the interesting day, but it provided.
I mean, they love you.
It provided us. Well, I don't know because it could have had the rest of their average in the evening, been up all night. So, but it did provide us a lot of time to sit and talk, and they were quite candid with some of their questions, and I appreciate their candor and their discussion. And then on 68. Just a giddy little schoolgirl that's coming back. We have, this year alone, out off of Douglas Sunrise area, that southeast corner of Rancho Cordova, we got another 380 units that have been built and people moving in down there. 9.5 minutes to get somebody out there it puts our people in danger because you're in flashover, or the patients, if it's a loss of consciousness, could be a death issue. So it's wonderful to have those response times back, and hopefully we'll see that result as the station's up and running. We'll see the benefits of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Woods. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this evening we will go into recess for our closed session, and I ask that all of you please leave so that when we come back, there's no one here to finish up this event. I'd like to finish this evening with this thought. Tonight we heard from our PIO about a particular event with a very touching story. I am an absolute firm believer, and I testify to all of you, that goes on every day in this agency. Every day. Okay? And so while this got some press and it's a pretty touching event, that goes on every single day in different forums with the men and women of our agency. Bottom line. Continue to do good. We're very proud of all of you. Thank you very much. We're now going to go into recess.